Welcome to the Red Sneaker Podcast, your guide to success in the worlds of writing and publishing. Now, here's your host, best-selling author and founder of the Red Sneaker Writers Center, William Bernhardt.
Hello, Red Sneaker Writers. This is episode 18 going out on May 6, 2019. This podcast is for Red Sneaker Writers, people who are serious about having a writing career and want some practical knowledge to help them do it. On this episode, I'm interviewing Marcia Markland. Marcia has been an editor at several major publishing houses for decades, and that includes St. Martin's, Thomas Dunne's, a host of others, and now she's working as a writing coach, as an independent advisor. She's got a lot of insight into what those big five publishers are looking for, and for that matter, has a lot of insight on how to succeed without the big five, if that's the way you choose to go. I'll also offer some writing tips, but first, the news. First news item has to do with bookstores. As in, are there still bookstores? Will there continue to be bookstores? Just when we think they're going away, something different happens. As we've discussed previously on this podcast, Barnes & Noble has been in financial straits and has been predicted to be on their way out. They put themselves up for sale last year, but still seem to be hanging in there and even adding some new, smaller stores. Amazon has started a chain of brick-and-mortar stores, but they seem to be still experimenting with format, trying to get it right before they go wide. But now there's a new player, and that's a Canadian chain called Indigo Books. They've just put their first bookstore in the United States in a luxury mall in Millburn, New Jersey. And luxury is the key word here because this is a different kind of bookstores. They do carry books, but in addition to the books, they carry some other things. And you're probably thinking, well, that's not unusual. They all have their greeting cards or board games or whatnot. But at Indigo Books, they have other items that are related to reading or writing, but tend to be more unusual, even artisanal in some respects. Apparently, the idea began when the chief executive of the chain, a woman named Heather Reisman, was having tea with the famed and wonderful novelist Margaret Atwood, who said that after this all finished, Atwood said she's going to go home and put on a pair of cozy socks and curl up with a book. And Reisman thought, socks? Really? Reading socks? And that triggered a great idea. How many of you are listening to this thinking, I always put on my cozy reading socks? Well, anyway, Indigo Books went with this in a big way. They've done all kinds of reading socks, and it's been very successful. Ariana Huffington, she of the co-founding of the Huffington Post, has said publicly that she gave all her friends reading socks last year, and she's not the only one. And in the intervening years, Indigo has designed a lot of their own other products. And it's like they've got candles, and they got wall art, they've got bento lunch boxes, herb growing kits, champagne flutes, throw pillows, scarves, all kinds of stuff in addition to books. Will this catch on? I don't know, but, it's something new and interesting. When I get out to the East Coast next, I want to check it out and see it for myself. The second news item in today's lineup has to do with the far less fun topic of plagiarism, which we have discussed before on the podcast as well. Sadly, it exists. And in some ways, the self-publishing or independent publishing movement seems to increase people's capacity to plagiarize and get away with it, because it's hard to even know about it, much less figure out some way to stop it. Most writers do not have the means to engage in extended, protracted legal action to take out a plagiarist. But there's at least one who does, and that would be the famed and hugely successful novelist Nora Roberts, who you know from romance and crime novels and mainstream novels that she's either written under her own name or as J.B. Robb. She has filed a lawsuit against an alleged plagiarizing author located in Brazil. In an interview with the Associated Press, she said, "If you plagiarize, I will come for you." and she means it. She said she's filed lawsuits. She realizes that not everyone has her wherewithal to undertake this kind of foreign country litigation, which may well take 5 to 10 years to resolve and be expensive. But she's doing it, and what's more, she's added that she will donate any damages she receives from the lawsuit to a literacy program in Brazil. It should be pointed out that this was brought to her attention by sharp-eyed fans who have been reading the novels of the Brazilian author in question. All of these books are apparently self-published. What's interesting to me is not whether, I'll continue to say allegedly, this plagiarism has happened. What the author in question has said was, quote, "I made a mistake. I was fooled by some mentors and coachers who told me that more, fast. Well, what does that exactly mean? It's not exactly denying that she's done it. In fact, she's also said that she's used some assistants and subcontracted with co-writers, and she doesn't know what they might have done, but blaming all of this on the need to get more content quicker, more, faster, rather than better, has triggered a negative chord in a lot of people's minds. Nora Roberts has also implicitly blamed Amazon.com, in part for not being more vigilant about the books they allow to be sold. But what she and others are keying into is the Amazon Kindle Unlimited ebook subscription program, which, as you probably know, pays authors royalties based on how many pages are read the first time the customer reads them, and thus creates an incentive for some writers to throw stuff together quickly, because it's not really a matter of how good it is, arguably. I don't really agree, but anyway, arguably, it's just how much can you get out there, how quickly, and get it onto people's Kindles so that they can click on those pages and you make a little bit of money. I don't know whether that's justified or not. I am not a fan of the way Kindle Unlimited works, and that's why, where I've had the option to do so, I've taken my books out of Kindle Unlimited. This whole paying people based upon pages access thing just seems completely whacked. But it is a fact, obviously, that the more books you have out there for sale, the more potential you have for making money. So maybe there's some truth to this. I will say this to the red sneaker writers listening right now. Ultimately, it's not going to be about how much you get out there, how quickly, maybe in the short term, but in the long term, what's going to matter is how good it is. That's how you build a lasting and enduring audience that not only reads this book, but looks forward to the next one. You only get that by taking whatever amount of time is required to make your writing really spectacular, memorable, and make readers want to read the next book and look forward to reading the next book. One additional PS to this, I just have to point out, as somebody who's been in this business for a while, that Nora Roberts has gone to court before. Way back in 1997, she sued the also quite popular romance writer Janet Daly, alleging plagiarism. And in response, Daly said that she was under, quote, immense stress. Apparently her husband was having some health issues, and she ultimately acknowledged that some ideas and passages in 2 of her books had been borrowed from Nora Roberts' books. That case was settled out of court, and indeed, Nora Roberts donated the damages that she received to Literacy Volunteers of America, which is now called Pro-Literacy. Nora Roberts is very much standing up for the rights of writers everywhere. One last news story, and one that will segue brilliantly into my writing tips section, and this has to do with audiobooks. I bet you already knew that audiobooks were exploding, that they were growing exponentially, and that they were the fastest growing sector of the book market. But some new statistics have indicated that it's perhaps even a larger trend and a faster growing market than we realized, and that it is continuing to explode on into 2019. According to a new survey that came from Audio Publishers Association, conducted at a recent conference. According to them, get this, half of all Americans, over half of all Americans aged 12 or older have listened to an audiobook. That's more than 50% potential audience for audiobooks. That's extraordinary. I mean, there were some other interesting findings that came out of this survey. I was particularly intrigued to find out what it said about where people are listening to their audiobooks, because that's changed even since last year when the number one place people listened was at home and number two was in their car, although they were close. But now that has shifted. As of 2019, 74% of all people say that they were listening to audiobooks while driving, compared to only 68% who listen at home. Cars are the number one place people are listening to potentially your audiobooks. Maybe that's because people are commuting more, they love their cars. I think it may have to do with some of that in-dash technology people have that allows them to deal with not only audiobooks but podcasts more easily. But at any rate, it is clear that audiobooks are becoming increasingly mainstream, and a very large number of people are using digital technology to find more time in their day to read or listen to books. One last interesting thing to come out of this survey. What's the most popular audiobook genre? Mystery, thriller, suspense. Particularly interesting to me, not only because I write thrillers, but because, of course, as everybody knows, the number one best-selling genre is romance by a large margin, mystery number two. But in audiobook, it seems to favor mystery, thriller, suspense, and the number two genre is history, biography, memoir. In other words, a nonfiction category. Speed is also important. 40% of those polled agreed that audiobooks help them get through more books. They could consume more books if they used audiobook. And 56 agreed that they used both written and audio formats to get through books quickly, which suggests to me that people are going back and forth, reading with their eyes when they can, but listening, say, when they're driving to work and back. That's amazing. One last bit of statistical, fascinating stuff. Over half of all audiobook listeners also listened to a podcast last month. In other words, there is a very close relationship between those who listen to podcasts like this one and those who listen to audiobooks, like, say, the one I just recorded for The Last Chance Lawyer. They go together very nicely, which leads directly into, you guessed it, the next section on writing tips. I've gotten some email from people suggesting that the tips I offer in this writing tips suggestion are not actually writing tips in the sense of, telling you to use fewer adverbs or something like that. You're right. I cover that sort of thing in one of the Red Sneaker books or another. There are 8 of them now, and there's about to be 9. So I don't want to duplicate this in the podcast. What I do try to do is tie into what's going on in the world and suggest ways that it might beneficially influence your writing. And that's what I'm doing doing today as well, talking about audiobooks. Namely, if you haven't got audiobooks, if you got a property and you've got the rights and you haven't found a way to get an audiobook out there, you are making a big mistake. To quote the business guys, you are leaving money on the table. And there's no excuse for that, particularly now when we have ACX, which is, of course, owned by Amazon, but makes it very easy for you to create an audiobook. Easy might be stretching it. Easier, technologically, to create an audiobook, especially for something that's already for sale at Amazon, their sister company. Either you can record it yourself if you have the talent and technological wherewithal, or you can use ACX to find a narrator. I've also mentioned Find Away Voices on previous